Hi, I'm Kimberly Lane.
I'm Sonia Jonathan.
And I'm Jonathan Ward. And together we're unlocking leadership. We're three experienced executive coaches with very different disciplines. In every episode, we take a question from a real client and provide key insights to address their challenge from our three different perspectives. It's a holistic approach to understanding challenges and opportunities. So let's get to it. Our question today is from Marlene in Memphis. I get the sense that trust has been affected by many things that are going on around us. What can I do to raise the trust level on my team? Kimberly, what should Marlene try to do to raise trust in her team?
Thank you. Thank you, Marlene, for a great question. Yes, we all have been through a lot. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of time to build trust with relationships or with your team. And you have to make a lot of deposits. And unfortunately, it could be one simple withdrawal, one simple act or behavior that makes a major withdrawal of those trust bank accounts. So, what I just advise people when coaching is one, you've got to be consistent in your behavior, consistent in your language, behaviors as far as doing the right thing, honoring your word, doing what you say you're going to do, acting honestly with integrity, having people's back, being open and honest yourself, being vulnerable yourself, being empathetic. So it's your day-to-day practices of first trusting yourself. And not lying to yourself, and then being authentic to your team. And they will begin to mirror those behaviors as you consistently perform them. Unfortunately, there's not something you can just do one act of and it's going to appear tomorrow. It's really a process of building trust, right? It's building trust, building that trusting bank account, and being cognizant of really trying to avoid making any kind of withdrawal that affects that trust. But it begins with yourself. It begins doing that so that others can mirror you, and you're creating that safe environment that they can start mirroring that trustworthy behavior.
Yeah, I would say that you hit pretty much a lot of the points that I think are very relevant. If you take it to a core level, when you don't trust, you don't feel safe. And so it's what helps us create safety. Now, I'm going to ask a question, and that is, was the team in a high trust state prior to whatever unfolded? Because if you did have that, then there's potentially a way to go back to that. So they already have, if you will, a blueprint of what that looks like and feels like. And there should be if you will, hopefully an interest in returning to that. So potentially you can get greater collaboration, more people wanting to do that because they experience that. If people haven't experienced being in a high trust environment, something that I often recommend, and I know that this is a book that we've referred to in the past called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. There is a workbook that goes with that when you do a presentation, and it's a pyramid that basically shows what you need from a base all the way up to be a highly effective team. It basically talks about trust, and it describes what does an environment in which high trust occurs looks like and feels like. Because sometimes if we've not experienced something, it's like, if you haven't traveled somewhere and you see the brochure and you see the picture, it's like, that's what it is. So potentially it's about creating that interest and potentially desire for people to get there. But it is about, and even if it just becomes about the safe space is here between us so that they can go there. That's what I want to say at this point in time. Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point that Patrick Leoncini's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team certainly is something that I go back and refer to a lot. Basically, without that foundation of trust, nothing's going to happen. You're not going to get to a high-performing environment. And Kimberly, as you said, consistency is a huge thing. If you tell people, bring me bad news, you can't shoot the messenger. You have to open hearing tough feedback from people, and you have to follow through with that. You've got to be transparent about what's going on. I think it's helpful for people to really talk about what's motivating them, or what are they hoping to get out of this. And it's great to have, if you don't want to do a full-fledged offsite team building thing, even start off a project with a conversation like, what does communication look like to you as part of this project? You know, how would you want people to communicate to you? What kind of information do you want to hear? Let's all talk about, let's get our expectations out on the table about what that looks like, so that you're dealing now with explicit requests and preferences from people rather than making assumptions about their implied feelings about things. You know, it's helpful, you know, to talk about what motivates me, what does communication look like, what experiences have I had? Yeah, I think one of the exercises that Leoncini recommends is, he said, just have people talk about, where did you grow up and what was a key event from your childhood that shaped you? And that gets people talking about their inner self a little bit, and in a safe way, but at the same time can be very insightful. And I think also to go through to where there have been breaches in trust, address those immediately. Don't, you know, I think it's important to get those out on the table, and let's talk about how we had this breakdown, and let's talk about how we fix it, rather than shooting the messenger again. This is a breakdown of the process. Let's figure out how we as a group prevent this kind of thing from happening again. And ultimately, I think what would be really helpful if you do get this trust environment to build up, is to get to the point where you can empower people on your team to give each other constructive feedback along the way. There are lots of different models that people use. One is the situation, behavior, and impact thing. You know, when this situation came up, you did this, which caused this impact. And again, it's not getting into inferring anything about that person's motivation, or you're a good person or a bad person, but this behavior caused this result, and let's talk about that behavior. And so again, I think that you can get people comfortable, not only you giving your team feedback, but them giving you feedback the same way you're giving each other feedback. That's ultimately what I think a nice trusting environment begins to look like.
Yeah, and I think, Jonathan, you brought up a good point. I think if we're all kind of going to the office or working together, only showing our professional self and really not knowing anything about anybody else, it's really hard to build trust, because we don't know each other as humans, right? We just know each other as professional, you know, robots to an extent, right? So I think investing time in getting to know the people on your team personally and professionally, you know, what are their hobbies? What do they have outside of work? Do they have family or not? Do they have kids or not? You know, what motivates them? You know, telling about a personal story of growing up. So I think investing time in other people and only for the purpose of getting to know them is very important in building that trust. And then I think, Sonia, you mentioned this as well, is, you know, creating avenues for a shared experience where everybody on that team is accountable for something unique, and they have to come to the team, and the team only succeeds if everybody together succeeds. That is a great way to build trust, of relying on each other, you know, having each other's back. But that shared experience, the more shared experiences you can do, it can be even around a work project. It doesn't have to be an, you know, external team building thing, but just, again, shared experiences where we're relying on each other to do something for the benefit of the team uniquely is another way to build that trust.
There's only two other pieces I want to add, that it's a follow through, like Jonathan said, if you're able to do an offsite, or if not, and that is having, even on a foundational basis for the group or for the function, the rules of engagement. What happens is then I can trust what everybody's going to be doing. We all agreed that we meet at 5 o'clock every Monday or whatever it is. So there's that was the consistency. The other thing I wanted to share is, one time I had to facilitate a meeting. I facilitated a meeting for a group that was not very connected and potentially might not be very connected. And so I was shying away from that question about what do they not know about you. So I just decided to ask the question of, okay, tell us what your favorite store to shop is at and why, and what is your least favorite store to shop at and why. That's so funny, because you know, becomes a question or site that you go to shop. And at the break, what I noticed was how many people were like, you like to go there, Josh? So it was like an immediate unifier without having, quote unquote, disclosed too much about oneself. But it was a shared experience. We all have shopped somewhere, you know, and we've all had either positive or negative experiences, or we go to something consistently for a reason. So those are the only things that I wanted to add in that regard.
Yep. No, I always like to use what's your secret indulgence too, in a way, because it shows a side of people. They're like, no way, you like to eat half a gallon ice cream and a box of Oreos too? Man, my favorite, right? So yeah, so that's just it's a whimsical, fun way too, because it allows us to laugh at ourselves, and everybody shows a little bit of vulnerability without being too much, right?
Yeah. I guess, to go to a cultural kind of thing, there are two extremes on this one cultural way of looking at trust. One is that we will build trust as we go through and work on this project together. And when we successfully complete it, then we will have created trust and have built a relationship. Whereas perhaps more in the relationship oriented cultures, like in Latin America, we have to get to know each other, and we're going to go out and we're going to go out to restaurants for a week before we even start talking about business. So we get to know each other. Then we can start talking about business because we get to know each other. So you've got to also be aware sometimes about how do people even want to have trust built up for them? Is it because they want to get to know each other's backgrounds better, or can I trust that you'll have my back when things get bad here, and when the project starts going to hell at some point?
But thank you for bringing up the thing about the culture thing, because in this world that we live in today, there's and because people are doing a lot of business on Zoom and this kind of way, we are interacting with people in different countries and different continents, and they may look at things a little differently. Again, last week I was doing some 360s for mostly people in Latin America, and when one of the people got onto the screen, she looked at my face. She saw that my name was Sonia. She said, "You do speak Spanish, don't you?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I want to do all my feedback in Spanish if you don't mind." And I said,
Oh,
"No, I don't mind." And what happened was, from that moment, I noticed that she had been like a little tense. Well, if English is not your primary language, and you're trying to give feedback that you think is important, obviously you've been selected, it's important. You want to feel safe in being able to do that and communicating it in terms that is comfortable to you. And so as a result of that, I felt that there was a deeper place that this person went to give me information that's going to, again, be very practical and useful for their boss. And in the process shared, so this was a person that was in Brazil, and she was Brazilian, which I was surprised. And she said, "Oh no, I'm married to an Argentinian. I've actually been married to two of them." It's like, really? But the thing about it was that, hey, I'm in this continent, and I am familiar with people from different locations, and I've established an approach to be able to do that. And I thought, oh, that's great. So thank you so much for sharing that. But had I said, no, I only can speak English, I think I would have gotten not as good feedback or pieces of information that she was able to share.
Yeah, because sometimes things cannot totally be translated authentically with the same emotion into other languages, right? If it's not your native language, there's a certain expression that might be present in your native language that's just hard to kind of form. It's not a one-on-one, transfer, if you will. So I think that's very true. Thanks for sharing, Sonia. Anything else, Jonathan?
No, that sounds very interesting. It's a really tough thing. Again, we were talking about this before the podcast, is that the trust level seems to be very low right now too. And so I think we're all yearning for places where we can work together and collaborate and kind of reestablish that feeling of connectedness with other people again.
Yeah, and I do believe a basic way to do that, and a fun way to do that, is just over food. Food is just culturally in every culture, a common form of connection and building trust and getting to know people and sharing. There's something about breaking bread with people that is so powerful, even if you can't even speak the same language, that is a good step to building the trust you're looking to create, Marlene, for your team. So thank you, Marlene, for your question today. We hope you and our viewers and listeners learn what raises the trust level on a team. To our listeners, if you like the content we shared today, please like this episode and also share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Unlocking Leadership -askthecoaches.com. We look forward to reading your reviews. To our listeners, and I will repeat this, not again. All right, break. You can also find Unlocking Leadership Ask the Coaches on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. If you have a leadership question or would like to reach out to our coaches, please email us at info@askthecoaches.com. at unlockingleadership-askthecoaches.com. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us today. Tune in next time to find the keys to unlocking your best leadership.